there for you. It helps you in all you do. It helps you know you do. So tune in and now enjoy the fun. Join us now, enjoy the show.
Hello friends, my name is Anne-Marie and today is a great day to learn something new.
So let's do that together. My name is Gabe and welcome to
Studio Classroom. We have a very exciting lesson for you today, friends. It is called Don't Ignore the Risk. And we are starting off with a question. What are some risks that you take every day without even thinking about it?
Well, whenever I drive my scooter or my car, that's taking a risk because anytime you're on the road, you really have to trust other drivers are, doing the right things, right?
That's right. There are so many different ways that we take risks every day without thinking about it, like dropping our kids off for someone else to take care of them. That's a risk.
It's true. Basically, anything that involves relationships is really a risk because even just the idea of trusting somebody else is a risk. You may have a really good friendship or relationship with somebody, but everything that you say and do could be maybe used against you in the future. So there are a lot of things in life that are risks that we don't normally think about.
That's right. And today our lesson is about risk assessment. Let's get into our first reading right now.
Don't ignore the risk. Understanding risk assessment.
John, are you really going to smoke that cigarette?
Relax. I only smoke once in a while.
My uncle used to say that. Had he taken the risks of smoking more seriously, he might have avoided getting cancer.
Hello, I'm Jack. 今天的 usage tip 要来学 had 加主词加过去分词，与过去事实相反的假设语气的倒装句。原本的句构是 if 加主词加 had 加过去分词。如果省略 if 将 had 移到句首，就会变成倒装句。句意虽然相同，但是更为正式，而且具有文学感。这种句型是用来表达对过去某件事的假设与其相对应的结果，语气中常会带有后悔或遗憾的意味。来看例句 ：Had she studied harder, she might have passed the exam. 如果她能更努力学习，可能就会通过考试了。
Okay, friends, what is risk assessment? Let's define this term before we get into our first section. Risk assessment is the process of finding out how dangerous something might be.
That's right. The company did a risk assessment before building the factory. Some people's jobs revolve all around assessing or analyzing the risks that might be involved in something. So it's a good idea for us to have some kind of risk assessment in a lot of things we do in life, even if it's not our profession. Now we have an interesting conversation here between Mary and John. Mary looks an awful lot like you, Anne-Marie.
She does. She looks very, very familiar. And she says, John, are you really going to smoke that cigarette?
Okay, well, I've heard this question asked before, not by Mary, of course, but it's just a question that you might want to ask somebody if you're concerned about them. Maybe you don't want them to get into the habit of smoking because smoking can be very addicting and, of course, it's not good for your body.
That's right. And John here says, relax. Now, when you tell someone to relax, first of all, that's usually the last thing that they do. But we usually say this to tell someone to calm down or to not worry.
That's right. Why are you so upset? Relax. Everything is going to be okay. And it is interesting what you just said, Anne-Marie. Be careful when you want to tell someone relax, okay? Because usually that's the last thing they want to hear. And if you say relax, they're probably not just going to relax right away.
No, it might make the situation worse. But here John says, I only smoke once in a while. Now, if you do something once in a while, it means that it happens sometimes, but not very often.
I eat ice cream once in a while as a special treat. What do you do once in a while, but not every day? Well, Mary says, my uncle used to say that. My uncle used to say, I only smoke every once in a while. He had taken the risks of smoking, had he taken the risks of smoking more seriously, he might have avoided getting cancer. So, had he, this phrase is used to talk about something that could have been, but it actually didn't end up being that way, okay? He did not take the risks of smoking very seriously.
All right, and we also see this word avoided here, friends. Avoided means to stay away from someone or something. So for example, maybe you avoid a certain dog because you know that that dog is dangerous or because you're afraid of it. So here we are talking about the risk of smoking, and it's kind of like asking the question, is it worth it? If you know something bad is going to happen, is it still worth it to do that activity?
Yeah, exactly. It kind of reminds me of that lesson we had, not too long ago about that bunny. He knew something bad was going to happen. There was certainly a risk or a threat involved, but he went ahead and did it anyway, and it was not a happy ending. Well, we do have more to learn in our next reading.
Don't ignore the risk. Every day, we make decisions that involve risk, whether we realize it or not. Although the word risk is often associated with the realms of finance and disaster prevention, it also plays an important role in environmental protection. In this context, risk refers to the possibility that exposure to pollutants will cause harm to humans or ecosystems.
我们来看名词 realm， 意思是王国或领域。来看例句 ：Crowned in gold and dressed in red velvet, the new king proudly surveyed his realm. 新国王戴着金色王冠，身披红色天鹅绒，骄傲地巡视他的领土。我们来学几个跟 realm 有关的惯用语。Beyond the realm of possibility， 意思是不可能的，超出可能范围。譬如Humans taking flight once seemed to be beyond the realm of possibility, yet, thanks to the Wright brothers, we can fly. 人类曾一度认为飞行是不可能的事，但多亏了莱特兄弟，我们可以翱翔天空。跟 beyond 相反的是 within。Within the realm of possibility 就是指有可能的，在可能的范围内。例如Do you think living on Mars will ever be within the realm of possibility? 你认为居住在火星上是可能的吗？
Thank you so much, Jack. Well, friends, we read here, every day we make decisions that involve risk, whether we realize it or not. We already talked about this at the beginning of our lesson, friends. We are taking risks every day, whether we realize it or not. This means even if we don't know it or even if we don't notice it, we are taking risks.
Whether we realize it or not, our actions affect the environment. Whether we realize it or not, we are influencing people around us, even if we're not influencers on social media. Can you think of another way to use that phrase, whether you realize it or not?
Although the word risk is often associated with the realms of finance and disaster prevention, it also plays an important role in environmental protection. We see this term to be associated with something. This means that it's connected to or related to something.
Smoking is often associated with health problems. When people think of smoking these days, it's easy to think of things like cancer and other health problems. Well, we read on here how it plays an important role in environmental protection. In this context, risk refers to the possibility that exposure to pollutants will cause harm to humans or ecosystems. And let's take a look at that word context. This is the situation or background that helps to explain something.
That's right. We use this word a lot of times when we're talking about how we use words in sentences. You need to understand the context to know what the word actually means. Now, there are a few other things we want to take a look at in this sentence. The next one is pollutants. Pollutants are things that make air, water, or land dirty and unsafe.
Factories release pollutants into the air and water. Now, you may notice I said it like pollutant, okay, or you could say pollutant. Sometimes when we say this word quickly, kind of like the word important, it becomes important or pollutant. So factories release pollutants into the air and water. There's another word we want to talk about here, and that is the word ecosystem. This is groups of plants and animals that live together in a certain place.
That's right, and pollution can harm the balance of natural ecosystems. All right, so we're talking here about risk when it comes to the environment. We're going to talk about a few other situations in our next section right after today's Info Cloud.
Hello friends and welcome to Info Cloud. Garrett, have you ever heard the phrase err on the side of caution?
I have, Rex. And by the way, for our English learners out there, the word air in this case is spelled E-R-R, but pronounced air, like A-I-R. It means to make a mistake, right?
Exactly. Err as in error. So when we say to err on the side of caution, we mean it's better to be too careful than to take a risky chance.
This phrase is often used when someone is deciding what to do in an uncertain situation. Like, I wasn't sure if the food was still good, so I erred on the side of caution and threw it out.
Good example. The expression likely comes from old moral or religious teachings where to err meant to stray from the right path. So it was wise to lean towards safety and carefulness.
So if you're not sure what to do, just remember it's usually better to err on the side of caution. That's right, friends. Keep on using that phrase.
有些人做事情会比较保守。今天要介绍的是一个关于风险判断的用语 ，err on the side of caution。这句话的意思是宁可过于小心，也不要冒险犯错。I wasn't sure if the food was still good, so I erred on the side of caution and threw it away. 我不确定那个食物还能不能吃，所以为了保险起见就丢掉了。Err on the side of caution 特别适用在面对不确定或可能有风险的情境，像是健康、安全或是财务决策。有时候保守一点反而是更负责任的做法。这就是今天的 Info Cloud， 我们下次云端见。
Don't ignore the risk. Risks generally can be classified into two categories: voluntary risks, which individuals willingly undertake, and involuntary risks, which are imposed without individuals' choice. For instance, smoking, which significantly heightens the likelihood of cancer, and driving, which brings the risk of traffic accidents, represent voluntary risks, because individuals consciously opt to engage in these activities. In contrast, air pollution poses threats to human health, but the general public cannot easily avert exposure to the air they breathe, making this an involuntary risk. Interestingly, people are not always adept at assessing risk. For example, Even though many air travelers fear plane crashes, statistics show that flying is far safer than driving. It is this kind of misconception that highlights the need for a specialized process known as risk assessment.
"接下来看 opt 这个动词，意思是选择或决定做某事。譬如 Instead of traveling far away for our family vacation, we opted to stay in the city and visit tourist sites we had never had a chance to see. 我们全家没有去很远的地方度假，而是选择留在这座城市，参观那些从未有机会去的旅游景点。Opt 的名词是 option， 意思是选项或选择。譬如 Our options for dinner are Lebanese food or Indian food, so which would you prefer? 我们的晚餐选项是黎巴嫩菜或印度菜，你比较想吃哪一种呢？它的形容词是 optional， 是指可选择的或非强制的。譬如Mrs. Caruso provided an optional summer reading list in hopes that some of her students would choose to spend their free time enjoying good books. Caruso 老师提供了一份暑假自选阅读书目，希望有些学生能利用空闲时间阅读好书。
All right, friends, let's continue on with the next section together. We read risks generally can be classified into two categories. Voluntary risks, which individuals willingly undertake, and involuntary risks, which are imposed without individuals' choice.
So let's take a look at that word willingly. This is to do something by choice, not because somebody else is forcing you to do it. For example, she willingly helped her classmates clean the classroom. But there's another word here that's kind of the opposite, and that is involuntary. What does that mean?
So involuntary means that something is done without control or without choosing it on your own. So you could say this for some things like sneezing, for example. Sneezing is an involuntary action. You can't decide you want to sneeze and then make yourself sneeze, usually. It's involuntary. And it is opposite to something that is voluntary that you can choose to do.
That's right. And we go on in our lesson here with an example. And this example also has to do with smoking, right? This is a great example for these kinds of things. For instance, smoking, which significantly heightens the likelihood of cancer, and driving, which brings the risk of traffic accidents, represent voluntary risks because individuals consciously opt to engage in these activities. So, about smoking, right? That's something that you willingly do. Nobody forces you to put a cigarette in your mouth, unless they're a bully at school, maybe, I don't know. Usually it's a willing thing that you do. Firsthand smoke, that is, when you're smoking, and you have a problem because of that smoking, that's because of something you did willingly. But secondhand, thirdhand smoke, that is when other people have to be around a smoker, that is involuntary. That's an involuntary risk.
That's not their choice to also inhale the smoke from that cigarette. Now, I like that we've also used the example of driving too, because driving is a voluntary risk. When you get into your car, you're choosing to put yourself in possible danger from traffic accidents. Now let's talk about involuntary danger here, friends. In contrast, air pollution poses threats to human health. This is something we all know, but the general public cannot easily avert exposure to the air they breathe. This is so interesting. To understand this sentence a little better, let's first talk about that word avert.
That's right. Avert is to prevent something bad from happening. The driver turned quickly to avert an accident.
Okay, so the general public cannot easily avert exposure to the air they breathe, making this an involuntary risk. I never really thought about this before. When I walk outside and I breathe in the pollution from nearby factories, it's not my choice.
Well, what else are you going to do, Anne-Marie? We have to breathe, right?
We do.
We have to breathe, and so we have to eat. Now, when it comes to eating, that is a voluntary thing, right? You can choose what you put into your body in that way. But even then, sometimes we ingest microplastics if we're not careful. Maybe we're not even aware of those things. We're all aware of pollution, but that's just something we can't necessarily help.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about this. Interestingly, people are not always adept at assessing risk. If you're adept at something, you're very skilled at it, or you're very good at something. So, for example, someone might be very adept at solving difficult math problems.
What are you adept at? We often use this word "at" with adept, right? So people are not always adept at assessing risk. For example, even though many air travelers fear plane crashes, statistics show that flying is far safer than driving. You're going to be safer in an airplane than on the road.
And we see here that statistics show this. There are actual numbers that show this information, or certain facts that we know, often from research.
So the statistics show, for example, that more people recycle now than before. Well, this is good. This is probably due to people raising awareness about environmental issues. So we see something else here. It is this kind of misconception that highlights the need for a specialized process known as risk assessment.
All right, a misconception. This is a wrong or a mistaken idea. Here's an example. There is a common misconception that bats are blind. The idea here is that a lot of people believe that bats can't see, but that's not true.
Well, friends, right now it is time for today's fun fact.
Hello, fact friends. I am Detective Ernest Finder, and I have a fun fact for you today. Did you know in English the term common sense means the normal amount of knowledge and decision making a person needs? It's true. Common sense. If someone takes too many risks or is afraid of everyday things, they might lack common sense. And that is today's fun fact.
As we finish our lesson for today, I want us to think more about this idea of risk assessment. I'm not sure if I'm very good at this or not. I need to think a little bit more. What about you, Gabe? Are you good at risk assessment?
Earlier we had talked about relationships and how there's risk involved in every relationship, maybe even every conversation. Anything you share could be used against you in the future. Trust is really important. But I think, I assess the risk and then I go forward anyway because I feel like maybe the benefits outweigh the disadvantages sometimes for some things. And then for other things, I think that maybe I am, risk averse?
You're afraid to take risks.
Yeah, averse or risk averse. Averse means, you try to avoid something. That word doesn't appear in our lesson, but some people are risk averse. They are afraid to take risks in certain areas.
What about you, friends? Do you think you are good at risk assessment in your life? This is something that you can think about and talk about, and definitely come back for tomorrow's lesson because we'll talk more about it then. But that's all the time we have for today. My name is Anne-Marie.
And my name is Gabe, saying see you next time right here on
Studio Classroom.
I am so proud to have you in my life. A good friend lasts a lifetime.